Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session where we're going to be talking about generative AI in marketing. Part of our session today, we're going to go through the foundation of what's happening. How should you think about it in marketing? What are we seeing in the market? Where are people adopting it? And hopefully we'll just have a good conversation between myself and Rachel on what you can expect as someone who's looking to get started in Gen AI. So my name is Jenny Kelly. I run our content practice, which has content strategy, people who make content, and scaled content. And so as you can imagine, the impacts of Gen AI are very quick to this side of the business on the people who make content, strategize around content. And so we're at the forefront of how we can really advise businesses in marketing, advertising, commerce on what this is and where to get started in their business.
And I'm Rachel Witt, and I work with Jenny Kelly on both content and Gen AI, coming from a strategic perspective, thinking about how we bring strategies to life and don't lose that piece of the puzzle as we bring forward our Gen AI solutions for clients.
Perfect. So Gen AI has been around for more than a year. I mean, it's been around for longer, but really exploded on the scene about a year ago. And when we talk to brands, it's very clear that everyone knows that it will transform their business. There's not a question that this is one of those things that will have a big impact and allow brands to do things like really get to personalization at scale, which is one of those things that typically has been expensive or hard to do. But more than that, there's a lot of things that this can impact when you think about your marketing org, what can you do and where to get started. Now, just like a lot of other things, I would say the market's maybe a little bit higher than when we first made this slide in terms of the hype curve. And the goal is, as a brand, where can you think about avoiding the depths of despair when it drops and really getting to a part where it gets you to a steady state. You can see a return on your investment. You can see the benefits of rolling this out, and hopefully with fairly minimal impact to your business when you're rolling this out within your org. So we talked about personalization and scale. That one is an easy one to target on a good use case for Gen AI. But the base of what brands, when they're thinking about it, are things like how can they make more content? How can they be authentic in the market while doing that? But a lot of the other drivers that we've heard from brands are things like, I think this can lead to cost reduction. I think we can get greater efficiencies in how we're doing it, or maybe who's doing the content. Or Rachel, I would love, do you have other things that you've heard from brands on what they're focused on with Gen AI?
Yeah, and I think one of those things is really quality. So, the ability to use data to truly drive your content within an automated way, bringing that creative to life through those insights is one of those use cases that we're seeing more and more. So it's not just about reducing cost or driving efficiencies, but really using data to drive that quality content.
That's a really great one. I love that you brought that one up, because a lot of companies that we talk to say, if everyone is using Gen AI, how can my brand stand out? And I think the part that is the one way to do that is the data that you bring as a brand, or working with a company that has this really unique data trained model that will do something different. And I think that's where the conversation gets interesting, so that we're not seeing the same content from everyone because they're using similar Gen AI solutions. So I love that one. So we talk about this, where can it help you work smarter, not harder? But I think for a lot of groups, a lot of brands, thinking about how to implement Gen AI can still feel like a little bit of a challenge, mostly because we know, as we talked about, there is going to be this full transformation across your life cycle. So it can feel a little daunting. There's no question, though, that the benefits of rolling it out, that you'll see that when you can get to it at scale. So we talked about personalization, but how can you reduce some of your operating costs? What can you do that allows you to get to market faster and really bring you that competitive differentiation? And I do think a lot of that ties to, if you're able to get more content in market and you're doing something to really target those different audiences, but that you're still showing up in the right way, in a way that feels true to your brand, you're going to want to do that to be able to stand out from your competitors, as everyone's driving towards the same thing. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, which is there's when you think about rolling this out, some of the places that have slowed brands down around implementation is that you really have to have a lot of these core capabilities to roll this out the right way. And most of you will have experienced that already. Do you have a legal team that's saying, hold on, you may not be able to start here yet, or we're not sure we're comfortable with Gen AI for image generation? I know, Rachel, I would love to hear some of your experiences if you've heard this from any of the others, but I'll give a quick one, which is, we were working on one brand on newsletter generation and text and copy creation. that one is a very easy use case and has less concerns around what you're doing, but the image generation side of it is still causing pause around, do you have IP? And does it take approvals just as long versus taking some imagery that's already approved and pulling that through? I don't know, Rachel, have you heard any other examples on some of these core needs where they need to get started?
Yeah, and I think the getting started thing is, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but tends to be sort of the most daunting part because, our clients know that they have to get started in some way, but they don't necessarily have their full infrastructure set up to handle it. So taking on a smaller chunk of the puzzle, like bringing, copy to life or using it even, internally to develop creative briefs or to use it as a brainstorming tool. Some of those are easier ways to get engaged and to start to, review how it works and start to develop some of those legal and compliance guidelines. So, they don't, as a client, we've seen, hesitation to get started, but then explaining that you can get started in these smaller bits and pieces, maybe starting with copy and rolling it out across the organization, tends to be a way in that feels a little bit less daunting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll give some more examples of the right questions to be thinking about in these buckets near the end of those. But to build on what you're saying, Rachel, definitely the place to start is around the tech and the tooling. What is your current tech provider and what solutions have they already rolled out that may be an easy place for you to get started that don't take you out of your life cycle of how you do things? So I guess the point of this slide is there are a lot of considerations, but would say don't let that be a place that stops you from finding the place to get started, because that's going to be the key for any brand is what are the building blocks to get started now so that when you are ready to do it at scale, you've started to answer some of those fundamental questions that you need to really do this the right way.
And I would add too, Jenny, that as you're looking for a partner to get started with Gen AI, somebody who will work within your existing infrastructure and technology is what you want to look for, because you don't want to disrupt your entire process. You want to bring it into your process and make it work for you.
It's absolutely key. Totally agree. So on this one, we wanted to share some data that we've done around trust, because we hear this a lot. And I mentioned this a little bit previously about what some of the concerns are. The first one, about 65% reporting they're concerned about intellectual property, the legal risk, what's happening with their data. And the key point around that, I would say, is picking the right tools, the right models, things to make sure that your data stays protected and that you have the rest of the guidelines and governance around how you use it to make sure that you're alleviating those concerns. And then the one on the right-hand side, the trust part around making sure that when you're rolling out a solution, you're not causing any decrease in a customer trust around your brand. Because this one was a pretty interesting stat that there was a survey that said customers could lose trust in a brand by around 144% if they knew that Gen AI or the AI was interacting with them. One thing I'll add on to this that we've seen is that if a brand already has high trust in the market, those companies that customers know they don't roll out solutions without it being at the very top of the class, they tend to not lose trust when they roll out some of these solutions. Some of the others that we've seen, we would actually advise them not to, say that it, like Clippy, our old friend in Word, that if you gave a persona to Gen AI, that sometimes that may not actually be the best thing for your use case of saying, hey, I'm here as your Gen AI tool, instead of rolling out a solution that may be powered by Gen AI, but you don't necessarily disclose it. And that's going to be different on a use case on sometimes when you do and when you don't.
Yeah, and I would say, Jenny, too, that trust starts from within your organization. So how leadership within your organization talks about Gen AI, establishes rules, talks about how it fits into your culture, what is something that you want to bring to life within your organization, what's something that you might not. I think really customers can sense when there's authenticity to how something is rolled out. And so that's really important that the C-suite is engaged and involved in what your Gen AI solution looks like.
And even more so, making sure that your internal to what you're saying, that your internal teams are a part of the rollout, because the marketer having that trust within your organization is going to be just as important, like you're saying. So bringing your teams along the journey of what they're doing, making sure that they feel that their value comes from being a part of the solution and adopting Gen AI as part of their role, and that it won't have a negative impact on their job. That is definitely a key part to when you're rolling this out internally. This graph right here just goes into a little bit more detail on, you saw some of the research that we've done. We have a trustworthy AI approach that can help mitigate that. And I'll say the focus on the human and the tech, the machine. How can you make sure that you're looking at trust on both of those? There's factors for how we measure this on the human and your marketing side of the house, and then other factors on the safeguards that you put into place on how you're doing your technology. I would say if you have a place where you're starting, doing one of this is very key to making sure there's no impact to your business when you roll out a Gen AI solution. Okay, so Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off this part of the deck.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, Jenny. So, a lot of this is hypothetical, and we want to talk about some actual use cases. So what do you do when the rubber meets the road? We know that this is going to transform marketing organizations, but how do you really get started? And so one of those things we talked about a little bit already is to assess your organizational readiness, whether that's your people, whether that's your tech. Really important to take a step back and really map out your organizational readiness and then what use cases you're ready for. And we're going to walk through some of the most common use cases in a minute, but it's really important to decide because you're not going to be doing everything. You're going to start with a couple of things and you're going to roll those out based on your organizational KPIs, what's most important to drive from a business perspective. And then, tying to end-to-end capabilities. So making sure, you're not just thinking about this in a vacuum, but you're thinking about it across all of your different capabilities, right? And how you might be able to start to leverage AI. And then prioritizing by value and feasibility. So while something might be, further out, you can put it in your roadmap, but think about the value to feasibility equation and how you're going to drive the most value with, in the quickest amount of time or in the most feasible of rollouts. So when we talk about Gen AI in general, in this sort of overall trustworthiness across the spectrum, right now we talked about text being one of those use cases that's really common and popular within our organizations coming to life. But I think it's really important that you think about, what is right for my brand. So this isn't just about what are you ready for, what's the world ready for, but what's right for my brand. I think thinking about efficiencies in your workflow, what are some considerations you have and what technology you're ready for is also going to help you determine where you map out here. So you may be a company that's set up for getting into multimodal and multi-brand right away, or, starting to play around with some predictive AI and, potentially video. These are things that, depending on the type of organization you are, you might be ready to start to experiment with that. But it's really important, that you could start with, text transcreation, even internally creative brief development. Like these are all ways that you can start right now. And these are available and accessible and very high fidelity in the market. So not just assessing what the AI is ready right now, but what are you ready for as an organization and really mapping out that intersection point.
Well, and I would add to this too, that the technology solutions, we're seeing new tech pop up every day, whether it's a new company or a new solution or something that would fit the right use case. I think one of the most important things that we advise on is something needs to be ready to scale within your business if it's really going to be effective. I was working with a brand recently that they had they had a really strong content workflow. They were testing Gen AI, but it was requiring for them to pop out of that workflow. They were leaving their existing tools, going to a different one, doing some of the work, going back into their tools. And the problem is that that's not really going to be ready to scale at a high volume that's going to give them the return on investment that they want. So one of the priorities when we work through what's the right use case to get started, it's also what tech is ready for you to be able to scale, and is your business ready? Is your data ready for it? Did you have all the right connections? And then just the most important one is, can you retain automation? Can you use all these other tools that, Rachel, we talk about in the content lifecycle that still do automation? Predictive analytics has been around for a while. The partnership now between automation, predictive analytics, and allowing Gen AI, we can talk about some of our favorite use cases in a second, but the ability to really harness that, you want to make sure that you're really maximizing your investment by staying within the life cycle, and picking the right tools is going to be key to that.
And picking tools that are not just a tool that's a flash in the pan, because there's a lot of tools out there that may not be around in a month or two. So making sure that not only are they kind of sustainable within your organization, but that the tools you're choosing are sustainable tools.
That's right.
All right. Well, we're going to jump into the many ways that you can leverage Gen AI across the marketing process. I'm going to pass it to Jenny to talk a little bit more about just that beginning market planning and budgeting section. And we're just going to walk through hit on some of our favorite use cases along the way. But yeah, starting at the very beginning of the life cycle.
And as I set the stage in the beginning, there is no question that eventually we're going to see transformation across all of these. I think sometimes that's why it can feel overwhelming, is what are the ones that you pick, where do you get started, that we're going to start to see this. A lot of the places that we say is, what's the reason for why you're rolling this out? Do you need cost efficiencies? Do you want to get your people familiar with the tool? Do you want to do something interesting with your creatives plus this data informed insights? So picking the right reason for why you're picking the use case is one of those places in that honeycomb. It's going to be one of those places that informs how you start. Because if you look at marketing and strategic planning, I talked about how predictive analytics, like predictive AI, has been around for a while. So say that you're looking at doing some creative concepting and you don't mind that this is an internal facing use case. It's not going to be a huge return on investment, but you're going to want this transformation over time. And if you have the data, I'll give you an example. If you had all the data on how your previous campaigns had performed, and then especially if you had it broken out by audience, can you then use Gen AI to suggest some campaigns and then partner predictive AI with these tools to say, how are these campaigns going to perform in the market based on how they performed in the past, based on what we know about our audiences? That starts to get really interesting for your team, because the co-pilot model of a marketer being able to know what they know about the brand, and then those data informed insights to say, hey, we think that this could do well because of X, or this one has a 90% chance of success, then that marketer gets to make a really great data informed decision about taking it to the next stage. So I think those are the parts where it starts to get really exciting when your partner, bringing the power of all those tools together.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, once you have some of those ideas, some of those creative concepts that are data informed, actually leveraging Gen AI to bring to life, the actual content. So whether that's, ad campaigns, whether that's, visual identity, whether that's, long form copy or ad copy, or, visualizations, like all of these things are possible. But the thing that makes it so exciting is that not only, is the technology getting better and better so that you're able to bring really high fidelity creative to life, but that, again, that creative is data informed. So really, it's critical that this isn't just sort of a one-off, but that it becomes part of the way you work. And I think the more it becomes part of the way you work, the more you tie it into your data, the better outcome you're going to have. And really the more personalized that content will be, not only to you as a brand, but to your audiences. So, getting away from that generic output and really creating something unique.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love if we could pick a few more use cases on here, because I know we don't have the details spelled out. We actually have, if you want to get more details on these use cases, we actually have, here's what all of them mean and here's what they are. But another pain point, if you're in creative content, the space, is the creative brief. So it can be a challenge to get stakeholders to fill it out, especially if you're doing it at volume. Sometimes they're not filled out completely, and it adds time to when you're trying to make content. So we have a pilot going right now where it's a like voice, it could be voice to brief, where Gen AI is prompting you with questions, and you can either speak your answer, or you can upload a document, or you can add text. There's a lot of ways to try to make it easier. And it's going to prompt you until it gets all the information. It doesn't, you can't really complete the brief until it has that complete set of information that it needs. And then if you have that brief plugged right back into your tool set that goes into the process, then you're finding those efficiencies, cost savings, solving some of those problems around quality to make sure that you're really maximizing what you do. So that one's another use case that I really like.
Yeah, that one's a great one. And sometimes you just have a conversation with someone and that's the start of your brief, and you can, record that conversation and put it right into the tool, and it learns your brand over time. So definitely a good use case there. And, showing that, the more you use these tools, the better they get. And so I think that's one of the other use cases is, using them from start to finish throughout your life cycle. They're going to get to understand a campaign, a brand, an audience. Another thing that, once we get that content produced is, how do we measure it? So thinking about, using AI to help you with campaign insights. So, if that campaign is doing well or not well, we can actually take that right back into that creative and make optimizations quickly, agilely, and not waste that time. So we really get to a place where, we can build the creative, almost real time, as it generates those campaign insights. So I think that's really exciting because, you're not always going to get it right the first time, but optimizations in the past have taken a really long time. You have to potentially reshoot creative, rewrite creative. And in this case, you've got a real head start on that.
So I think I know we're staying on the slide for a while, but I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road. Two other use cases I'd love if we hit on. The translation transcreation one. This one is such a pain point for brands needing to be able to do this at scale, get it right, make sure that the translation, that the materials are really like in the regional markets the right way. So the translation tools right now, I would say, are at the enterprise level ready, because what it costs right now when you have to pay per word to do translation, there is a high cost element to what this is, where we're seeing Gen AI is making that cost almost negligible, where for most of the common languages, we're seeing an initial accuracy of the tool of what you expect in marketing language in that country, at least 85% or higher for, again, most common languages. And the other common ones, more like 95% and higher. So business, if you decide once it reaches this percentage, it goes to natural language QA, you're going to see immediate cost savings in that space. So that one is a really great use case if this is a pain point that you have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and one of the other sort of side effects of that is that because it's faster and cheaper, it makes translation more accessible, which is something that, makes the content itself more accessible. So I think like it has that, you hear a lot of, the content isn't coming from a person. There's, sort of creative, complaints about potential use cases in Gen AI, but there are so many positive effects, like the ability to translate content into multiple languages quickly and reach audiences that you haven't had the chance to reach before.
Yeah, languages that you didn't have on your roadmap because it was too pricey, and you can now add them. It's really exciting. And then my favorite current use case, I talked a little bit about it in marketing, building your marketing plan or creative concepting, is content review. So whether your content's made by a marketer or creative or Gen AI, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter your tool set. Being able to I'm going to use an email campaign as an example. You've generated an email campaign, you can run it through a content review tool, and you could pick a bunch of different modules depending on your need to analyze it. You could check it against brand guidelines and tone. You could check it against like accelerating legal or risk review. Because you had this sentence in your email, you need this legal language at the bottom, or when it goes through approvals, this is going to be a thing that needs to be reviewed. You can review it against trends in the market. You can review it against unconscious bias. And then the other one that's the data informed part that's really exciting is, again, if you're monitoring your creative campaign, your campaign results by audience, you could review it by that and say, hey, in the past, this campaign was successful. You should think about changing this language this way. Or if you have a partner like us that has proprietary data by industry and by demographic, it could say, hey, this demographic, you might want to shift the language to this because they like it better. And what I really like about this is creatives embrace this as well, because even though they've generated, you're taking these data informed insights and saying, we think this could make it better. And then they get to make a decision. And that way of allowing them to embrace the tool and data and hopefully making something better, I think it's a really positive use case for a brand.
Awesome. All right. So, we're seeing these, things in action, right? So some of our proprietary research, some of our own client data, these numbers are coming back at, 200% increase in writer capacity. And this is, we're talking about, training and getting that really accurate content. And so there's obviously some work that goes into the upfront, but, I think this number is only going to increase as AI gets better and smarter. And as you train your models, this number will, only increase. Image generation, there's a big decrease in time spent on manual design tasks. And some of these design tasks are not things that your creatives really want to be doing. They're sort of these minute, like background removal, things that are not really, high value to them as a designer. So it allows actually a little bit more creativity to have space. So I think that, I think creatives are really embracing some of this because it's taking away some of the tasks that are, not as much fun or don't really require that human creativity. And then process efficiencies. This is huge. So, hours saved per week, 11.5. This is a big deal. So, all of that time that businesses are going to save can be employed against other things, a new creative concepting, making sure that, you're leveraging trends in the market, bringing strategy to bear. So all of these things that you're saving with this time and process efficiency is huge for marketers.
Well, and one thing that may feel obvious, but I think still is worth saying, is you're not going to see these right away. There's some change management that needs to come with the rollout. Like you're going to need additional QA while you're rolling out these tool solutions. Think about understanding the roadmap of when you'll start to see that those savings is also going to be really key.
Absolutely. So in terms of most anticipated benefits, if you think about this in two ways, there's your customer, obviously. And, we can expect, not maybe immediately, but if this, some of these use cases get rolled out, up and running and set up the right way, you're probably going to see things like improved sales, improved conversion rates, more engagement, more, improved quality of content, which I think is something that is maybe an unexpected output. But if you think about the way data drives content, we've talked about this already, but yes, you're going to get better quality. Also, you're not going to be taxing smaller teams as much. So, you're going to be able to produce more content. So all of these things are things that your customers are going to be able to achieve. Better omni-channel consistency. So you're not going to have creative in one channel that's totally different than another, because you're able to obviously create that content more quickly and then match that content. And then, update it and drive better content for them based on that data lifecycle. Within a marketing organization, internally, you're going to see more efficient workflows and more productivity. You're going to see, improved partner collaboration. I think one of the big ones here is you're going to see decreased cost in production and, reduced agency fees. We talk a lot about how does this look and impact your agency models. It is going to shift things, and agencies and partners who are paying attention to these trends are going to be able to help support marketers do this in an efficient way. And then, faster content creation, faster decision making, and then increased localization speed. So being able to really take that content and localize it, whether that's at the, persona level, at the region level, really important, because, there's, as you move towards a more, custom content, you're obviously going to be growing the amount of content you need.
So in the beginning, this builds on the honeycomb, and we said we'd have some key considerations to think about. These are the things that we would say, do you have answers to these questions when you're thinking about getting started? So, in the business sponsorship bucket, who's driving this ask and what are the primary goals? How does this work within your overall business strategy? And that will help you really then get to what's the roadmap of what you want to build out. There's so many places to get started, so many things that you can do within your organization. So let's build out what's your 3, 6, 12-month plan, and how do you want to start to roll these out? What's the priority? What's the business value? Who are you making your business case back to say, here's the investment, here's what it takes now. This takes 3 weeks, X amount of dollars. We think we can save 40% by this time, and it's going to take 2. So whatever that is, build that into a business case and a roadmap, because then you'll be able to check in on the success. How are you doing against that? And does that help you build towards future use cases? We talked a lot about the tech and tool selection. This is so key. Are you going to build? Are you going to buy? Is it something included in your tech set? And we know that it can be daunting at scale to bring in a new technology. You need to make sure that this integrates into your ways of working, into your current technology, so that you're not losing any efficiencies gained by GenAI by having a breakdown in the way that your tools connect and how they talk to each other. And then for some of the use cases, does a build make more sense? Does it get you what you need and really integrate the right way into your tools? Do you have the right foundation? Can you trust the model? Is it protecting your data? All of those are key questions to ask, and make sure you have the right partner that can advise you on what that setup looks for you. And then the last one is around risk and governance. How are you managing it? How can you protect against any attacks? Are you training it the right way? Are there regulations that you need to be adhering? If you're a global company, are there different rules by different country? And make sure that you have someone that can advise you on what that looks like, so that you're picking the right thing. And then across enterprise wide, what does this look like in your operating model? What does this look like with your people? Does this change any of your hiring? Does this change any of your training? So a lot of questions, but I'll say it doesn't have to feel, it can feel overwhelming when you think about all the things that have to be answered. But the place that we definitely want to go to is still, don't let that stop you from finding a way to get started. I know that everyone's taking a lot in their roles right now, and it feels like there's a lot of different market pressures, that this is an added one on top of that. I think the key is build towards the future. Whatever plans you're building within your teams, what does this look like? Where do you get started? And is your organization ready for that?
That's right, Jenny. And I think also, if you're going to engage a partner on GenAI rollout throughout your organization, find somebody who's willing to come in and help not only train talent, but really help to explain that this isn't taking your job. This is about upskilling and shifting what you're doing to become better and better at the things that GenAI needs, and really about getting value from GenAI as an employee. So I think.
What's the quote you said earlier?
Yeah. So I always say this, and people always smile, because I think every time I speak about GenAI to a larger group or a client, they're worried about their jobs. I think that's how a lot of content creators feel. And I say, GenAI is not going to take your job, but someone who's good at using it might. And I think that's really true. So embracing it and figuring out a way to make it work for you is so important. And it really will, I think, if you do it well, make your day-to-day better. And I think it's up to leadership to help to roll that out in a way that feels, less daunting to employees. All right. So we have a GenAI readiness calculator. So if you want to use this QR code, this will assess essentially a baseline where you are in terms of your readiness as an organization. So it'll help you identify strengths, gaps in your marketing organization, and just in general, your readiness to support GenAI. So this is a tool you can use on your own to do a quick assessment. So we encourage you to scan this and take our readiness calculator.
Yeah, it'll give you a report, like she said, on the back end that hopefully feels really tactical to you. Says by those buckets that we talked about, people, process, tech, what do you need to be thinking about? What do you need to maybe change about your current approach that makes you ready to get started?
And then think about that and layering the use cases that are going to be most important to your business, and look for those intersection points between where you're most ready and where some of those use cases are. And that can be a way to get started that's a little bit less daunting.
That's right. Awesome. So thank you for joining us for this session. I know we covered a lot of content, a lot of information. Hopefully you find it useful. And if there's any outstanding questions or anything that relevant to your organization, please reach out. We'd love to talk more.
Thank you.
Thank you.